What if the police were called on you while you were the police chief? Tanya Johnson just wanted a peaceful afternoon at her neighborhood pool, but within minutes, she was accused of trespassing, confronted by a woman who didn't recognize her face, and threatened with the very department she now led. What unfolded next wasn't just shocking. It was a reflection of the silent racism hiding in plain sight. And Tanya, she wasn't staying silent anymore. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the sleepy suburban town of Willow Creek. The streets, lined with neatly trimmed hedges and freshly painted fences, seemed untouched by time. Children ran through sprinklers, their laughter echoing in the air as parents sipped lemonade on their porches. Everything appeared perfect, as if a real-life postcard had come to life. At the Willow Creek Community Pool, a familiar hum of activity filled the air. Families lounged on comfortable pool chairs, occasionally jumping into the refreshing water to escape the scorching summer heat. A couple of kids were engaged in an intense game of Marco Polo while their parents exchanged gossip and summer plans. The lifeguard perched on a high stool, surveying the pool as the soft sounds of music wafted through the air. In the far corner of the pool, Tanya Johnson floated on her back, completely immersed in the tranquility of the water. Tanya, a recent transplant to Willow Creek, had moved to this town just weeks ago to begin her new position as the town's newly appointed police chief. It was a big transition, leaving behind her previous life in the city for a fresh start in a suburban community. But despite the challenges that came with her new position, Tanya found herself drawn to moments like this, moments of peace, where the only thing that mattered was her connection to the water and the brief respite it offered from the stresses of leadership. She had always been an advocate for community policing, believing that the best way to serve and protect was through building genuine relationships with the people she served. Her vision for Willow Creek was one of transparency, mutual respect, and above all, inclusion. Tanya knew the road ahead would not be easy. She had inherited a police force with a complicated history, and many of the community's residents were wary of the changes she intended to bring. As she allowed herself to float and relax in the pool, Tanya couldn't help but wonder how she would make her mark in this seemingly perfect town. She wanted to prove herself as a capable leader, one who could unite the community and break down the walls that often separated law enforcement from the people they were meant to protect. Unbeknownst to her, however, the idyllic afternoon was about to take a dramatic turn. Across the pool, a woman named Linda Peterson watched Tanya closely. Linda had been part of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association for years and took great pride in ensuring that the neighborhood maintained its exclusivity. In her eyes, the pool was her domain, and she took it upon herself to ensure that the rules were followed to the letter. Linda Peterson had been watching the pool for a while now, carefully observing the families who entered, the children who splashed around, and the adults who lounged under the umbrellas. It was a job she'd taken on as part of her self-appointed role within the neighborhood, a role that gave her a sense of authority. The Homeowners Association had never officially given her the title of pool manager, but Linda operated as though she was in charge. For years, she had policed the small, intimate space, ensuring that only the right people used it. So, when Tanya Johnson entered the pool area earlier that day, Linda immediately took notice. Tanya, though relaxed and calm in the water, was unfamiliar. Linda had been an active member of the Homeowners Association for long enough to know nearly every face in the neighborhood, and Tanya's was new. Linda's mind began to churn. Who was this woman? Why hadn't she seen her before? The whispers from the other pool-goers didn't help. Tanya was new to the area. That much was clear. But who was she really? What was her connection to the community? Linda's gaze lingered on the woman with an almost possessive scrutiny, as though Tanya's presence in her space needed to be validated. She doesn't look like she belongs here, Linda muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. It was a thought born from a mix of suspicion and a deep-rooted desire to protect what she considered her pristine little world. But what was it that unsettled her so much? Was it Tanya's calm demeanor, her dark skin, or simply the fact that she didn't look like the typical Willow Creek resident? Linda couldn't quite place it, but she felt the urge to confront her. It was the way she was wired. She had always found comfort in enforcing the rules. And she did not hesitate. Walking across the hot concrete, Linda approached Tanya, her flip-flops slapping sharply with each step. Tanya remained floating, unaware of the confrontation that was about to unfold. She had come to the pool to escape the heavy responsibilities of her new role as police chief. But in that very moment, her peace was about to be shattered. Linda cleared her throat loudly, drawing Tanya's attention. Tanya opened her eyes slowly, and a polite smile curved her lips as she looked up at Linda. "Excuse me," Linda began, her tone sharp. "I don't think I've seen you around here before. Are you a member?" Tanya raised an eyebrow at the question, momentarily confused. She had been a member for weeks now, having moved to Willow Creek just a short time ago, but she didn't let her initial frustration show. Instead, she remained calm and composed, her voice steady. "Yes, I am," Tanya replied, still floating in the pool. "I live just down the street, on Oak Avenue. I'm new to the neighborhood. I have a membership." Linda's eyes narrowed slightly, but her tone remained unfazed. "I see. Well, I know nearly everyone in this neighborhood, and I've never seen you here before." Tanya felt the weight of the scrutiny in Linda's gaze, but didn't let it shake her. She simply replied, "I assure you, I live here, and I'm a member. If you need to verify, I have my membership card." Linda, however, was not satisfied. She said, with a dismissive huff. "I'm not so sure about that. You know, I could always check with the HOA office. But right now, I think you should leave. This pool is for residents only, and I don't think you fit in here." Tanya's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, she wanted to confront Linda directly, but something inside her told her to remain composed, to see how far this would go. The last thing she wanted was to escalate the situation, but she also knew she could not let this injustice go unchallenged. "Ma'am," Tanya said, her voice calm but firm, "I told you, I am a member. I have every right to be here, and I will not leave." Linda's face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. Her eyes darted around, noticing that a few onlookers had paused in their swimming to watch the exchange. The tension was building. "I'm going to call the police," Linda snapped. "If you refuse to leave, I'll have no choice." Tanya's heart pounded not in fear, but in frustration. The woman standing before her, full of entitlement and suspicion, was threatening to call the very department she led. This was the test, she thought. How far would this go? Would Linda push things further, or would she realize the truth? Linda's hand hovered over her phone, trembling with a mix of indignation and self-righteousness. She had lived in Willow Creek long enough to know that things like this, disruptions in her perfect community, couldn't go unchecked. She had seen enough to know when something was off, and Tanya, in Linda's eyes, was the disruption. "Hello," she said, dialing 911 with a sense of urgency. "Yes, I need the police at the Willow Creek Community Pool. There's a woman here who refuses to leave, and she's causing a disturbance." Tanya stood still, refusing to react, her eyes steady as she watched Linda make the call. She could feel her heart racing as she realized the magnitude of the situation. She had lived through a lot of challenging moments in her career, but this was different. This was personal. This wasn't about enforcing the law or serving her community. It was about being unjustly targeted simply for being who she was. Linda's voice continued to rise, her words becoming more frantic. "She's being aggressive and uncooperative. She doesn't belong here, and I need someone to come and deal with her." Tanya took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside of her. She had spent years building trust with her community, years striving for fairness and justice. And now, here she was, on the receiving end of an abuse of power. She remained composed, her stance steady in the shallow end of the pool as she waited for the officers to arrive. She could only hope that when they did, they would see the truth. Minutes later, the sound of sirens from a distant police cruiser cut through the warmth of the summer afternoon. Tanya could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest, but she refused to show it. Her expression remained calm, as she had always taught herself to remain under control, no matter the circumstances. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just a normal call for assistance. It was a test. When Officer Brian Taylor and Officer Lisa Mitchell arrived at the pool, their faces were calm, almost bored. They had seen their fair share of calls, from minor disputes to more serious confrontations. But as they approached Linda, who was practically shaking with righteous indignation, they could tell this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. "Ma'am, what's the situation here?" Officer Taylor asked, looking first at Linda and then at Tanya, who was still standing in the pool, her arms folded. Linda rushed to explain. "This woman is trespassing. She's causing a disturbance. I've never seen her before, and she's refusing to leave. She's being aggressive. I think she should be removed immediately." Tanya's calm voice interrupted before Linda could continue. "I'm a member of this pool, and I'm not trespassing. I live in this neighborhood, and I've had my membership for weeks." Officer Mitchell, a seasoned officer, studied Tanya for a moment before turning to Linda. "Have you seen her membership card?" she asked. Linda hesitated. "Well, no. She just told me she has one, but she's not acting like she belongs here." Officer Mitchell turned to Tanya and nodded. "Can you show us your membership card, ma'am?" Tanya, knowing that she was in the right, simply nodded. "Of course. My membership card is in my bag on the lounge chair." Officer Taylor stepped forward to retrieve the card. He wasn't particularly concerned, but something about the way Linda had raised the alarm made him cautious. He returned moments later, holding the card, confirming its validity. "This is her membership," Officer Taylor said. "Everything checks out." Linda's face flushed a deep shade of crimson. She had hoped that the officers would take her side, that the power of the law would back her personal sense of control over the pool. But her hopes were dashed. She opened her mouth to argue, but Officer Mitchell stopped her with a sharp glance. Ma'am, it seems like this situation was a misunderstanding. We don't need to escalate it further. Tanya's eyes remained steady on Linda, her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. But she kept her voice level. I've already told you I'm a member, but you felt the need to call the police on me. You assumed something without even asking. This isn't just about the pool, Linda. This is about respect. Linda, flustered and realizing that the situation was slipping out of her control, took a step back. I wasn't thinking clearly, she stammered. I was just making sure the rules were followed. Officer Taylor gave Linda a firm but understanding look. We understand that, but this situation is about more than just rules. It's about how we treat each other as members of a community. Tanya's gaze remained steady. Exactly. How we treat each other. And what happens when someone is targeted unfairly because of assumptions, because of biases. I'm sure you wouldn't have called the police if I were someone else. The words hung in the air between them. Linda's face paled as the weight of Tanya's statement began to sink in. She had acted based on assumptions and a sense of entitlement. Her self-righteousness had led to an unnecessary conflict that was now spiraling out of control. Officer Mitchell looked at Linda and then at Tanya. We can't change what's happened, but what we can do is learn from it. It didn't take long for news of the incident to spread through the neighborhood. Social media was quick to pick up the viral story. Videos of the confrontation were shared. First, from the few bystanders who had witnessed the scene, and later from those who had heard about it. In the span of hours, Tanya's experience at the pool became the talk of the town. People began to share their thoughts, some sympathetic, others critical of the way Linda had handled the situation. What if it had been someone else? One commenter asked. Would she have called the police so quickly? Would she have treated them the same way? The question lingered in the air, resonating with many who had experienced similar biases themselves. But even in the digital age, rumors and accusations spread quickly. Some residents supported Linda, claiming she was simply trying to ensure that the neighborhood's standards were upheld. Others, however, began to see a more insidious pattern in Linda's actions. One woman, Cynthia Lewis, who had witnessed Linda questioning an elderly couple of color at the local park months before, spoke out publicly. This isn't just about a pool, she wrote in a community Facebook group. It's about a pattern of prejudice. I've seen Linda target people before, questioning their right to be in spaces she considers her own. This has happened before. As more people came forward, the full extent of Linda's behavior began to unravel. Residents who had previously been silent about Linda's actions found the courage to speak out. Others quietly rallied behind Tanya, showing their support for her calm handling of the situation. Within days, the once cozy neighborhood pool was no longer a place of leisure. It was ground zero for a community reckoning. Tanya knew that the confrontation at the pool had left more than just a stain on her afternoon. It had revealed a deeper issue within the community, one that she couldn't ignore. The town of Willow Creek was known for its picturesque streets and the seemingly perfect lives of its residents. But underneath that facade was a strain of prejudice that had lingered far too long. She could have let the situation go. She could have ignored the comments, brushed off the confrontation, and moved on with her life. But as the newly appointed police chief of Willow Creek, Tanya had a responsibility that went beyond enforcing laws. She had a duty to ensure that every resident felt safe, heard, and respected. So, Tanya did what she knew was right. She filed a formal complaint against Linda for harassment, outlining the events at the pool and the harm that Linda's actions had caused. It wasn't just about her, Tanya realized. It was about the whole community. That night, as Tanya sat at her desk reviewing the paperwork for the complaint, she reflected on the significance of what had transpired. This was more than just a personal battle. It was a chance to help the town confront its issues, to raise awareness about racial prejudice, and to foster a culture of understanding and respect. The decision wasn't an easy one, but it was necessary. Back in her home, Linda struggled to process the events of the day. Her phone buzzed with notifications, some condemning her actions, others offering words of support. She had never been under such scrutiny before. The neighborhood that had once felt like her domain now seemed distant, almost alien. As the community began to turn on her, Linda realized she was no longer the unchallenged authority she once was. The posts on social media were relentless, some calling her a racist, others questioning her place in the homeowners association. The neighborhood she had once thought of as her own now felt foreign and hostile. Her guilt began to seep in, but so did her pride. Linda had always believed in the righteousness of her actions, even when others saw them as overbearing. She had thought of herself as a protector of the neighborhood, but now she was forced to reckon with the harm her actions had caused. As the days passed, Linda found herself retreating further into her home, avoiding the public eye. The once pristine lawn that she meticulously maintained felt like a mockery of the perfect life she once believed she had. She sat alone in her living room, her fingers nervously flipping through the local newspaper. Every headline seemed to mention the incident at the pool, but none of them painted her in a favorable light. Some referred to her as the Karen of Willow Creek, others with more pointed criticisms, calling her behavior an example of racial prejudice. Her eyes blurred with tears, but she refused to cry. She had spent her life building a reputation, and now it seemed like it was all unraveling in front of her. She had always taken pride in her role in the neighborhood, her involvement in the homeowners association, her position as a self-appointed guardian of rules and order. Yet now, with the weight of the community's disapproval pressing down on her, Linda realized she had been clinging to a sense of authority that wasn't earned, but rather imposed on others. The nagging voice of self-doubt crept in. How did I get here? She had always considered herself a good person, protective, diligent, well-meaning. But now, the more she reflected on the events, the more she recognized the truth. Her actions were not just about ensuring the neighborhood's security. They were about control. They were about asserting dominance in a way that excluded those who didn't fit her ideal image of who belonged. And her inability to see the flaw in her approach was a blind spot she could no longer ignore. Linda knew she needed to face Tanya. The moment had to come. But where would she begin? How could she make this right? She decided to go to the police department to speak with Tanya directly, face to face. Linda thought about the conversation they would have, trying to find the words to apologize, but something told her it wasn't going to be that simple. The day Linda walked into the Willow Creek Police Department was unlike any she had experienced before. The building, once a place where she had always felt safe and removed from the chaos of daily life, now felt foreign. She walked through the doors with a mix of trepidation and resolve. The staff behind the front desk gave her a polite nod as she made her way down the hallway toward Tanya's office. Tanya's office door was slightly ajar, and Linda hesitated before knocking. She had never imagined herself in this position, the one coming to apologize, the one seeking redemption. But she knew this was a necessary step, and for the first time, Linda felt the weight of her previous actions more than ever before. Tanya looked up from her desk as Linda entered, her expression neutral but expectant. "Linda," Tanya greeted her. "What brings you here today?" Linda swallowed, trying to steady her shaking hands. I I want to apologize for what happened at the pool," she said, her voice wavering slightly. Tanya sat back in her chair, folding her arms. "I think it's important to hear what you have to say. Please, go ahead." Linda took a deep breath, bracing herself. "I know that what I did wasn't right. I was wrong to call the police on you, and I was wrong to assume that you didn't belong there. I was caught up in my own prejudices, and I didn't see you as a neighbor, as someone who had every right to be at that pool. Instead, I saw you as an outsider." Tanya's expression remained calm, but she could see the struggle in Linda's eyes. This wasn't easy for her. Linda continued, "I've been hearing a lot from people around the neighborhood, and the more I think about it, the more I realize how many times I've done this before. Singled people out, treated them as if they didn't belong because they didn't look like me or act like me." Tanya stayed silent for a moment, allowing Linda to continue. "I'm not proud of it, and I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want you to know that I recognize the harm I've caused. I see how my actions perpetuated this division, this unspoken tension that I've contributed to for years." Tanya nodded slowly. "I appreciate you saying that, Linda. It's not easy to admit when we've made mistakes, but recognizing those mistakes is the first step toward making real change." Linda nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I can ever fix this, but I want to do better. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." Tanya's voice softened, though her words carried the weight of authority. The road to change starts with accountability, but it doesn't stop there. It's about action. It's about living with integrity and learning to confront biases, both in ourselves and in others. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth it. Linda sat in silence, contemplating Tanya's words. For the first time, she truly understood the scope of what needed to be done. The weeks that followed were a time of transformation for both Linda and the community. Linda, after much reflection and guidance from Tanya, decided to take part in community outreach programs that focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It wasn't easy. At first, she felt like an outsider in those spaces, like she was a guest in a world that she had once excluded. But slowly, Linda began to realize that the very people she had once questioned, the people she had once judged so harshly, were the ones who had the power to help her heal. She started attending town meetings on social justice, volunteering at local events that aimed to bridge divides, and working with Tanya to create safe spaces where residents could voice their concerns without fear of judgment. Meanwhile, Tanya worked tirelessly to rebuild the trust that had been fractured in Willow Creek. She encouraged her team to approach each case with empathy and fairness. She hosted open forums where community members could ask questions about policing, diversity, and what true community engagement looked like. As the months passed, the town began to shift. At the next HOA meeting, there was a palpable change in the air. Linda stood before the community, her face pale but determined. She had taken the first steps toward redemption, and though it wasn't going to happen overnight, the sincerity in her voice was undeniable. "Today, I stand before you to ask for your forgiveness," Linda said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I made a mistake. I let my biases control my actions. But I've learned that change doesn't happen by simply saying the right words. It happens by living those words every day." There was silence in the room, and then, one by one, the neighbors began to nod. Some even stood and applauded. Linda didn't expect forgiveness from everyone, but the act of standing there, owning her mistakes, was the beginning of something real. As the seasons changed and the leaves turned from green to gold, the town of Willow Creek began to embrace a new era. The difficult conversations that had started in a poolside confrontation had blossomed into opportunities for healing, understanding, and real change. Tanya continued to lead with grace and firmness, and Linda, though she still struggled at times, was learning to walk the difficult path of self-reflection and growth. The summer heat may have sparked the fire, but it was the determination of people like Tanya and Linda to seek accountability and healing that turned it into something more meaningful. A lesson not just for Willow Creek, but for every community. And so, the story of Willow Creek, of prejudice confronted and biases broken, continued. A story of two women who, despite their differences, chose to move forward together. Their journey was not about perfection, but progress, a reminder that even in the face of division, there is always a chance for understanding, growth, and unity. The story of Linda and Tanya is not just one of confrontation. It's a powerful testament to the potential for personal growth, accountability, and ultimately, reconciliation. Through their unexpected and uncomfortable encounter at the pool, two women, seemingly worlds apart in their backgrounds and experiences, were brought face to face with their own biases and the profound impact these biases have on others. At the heart of this story is a simple yet profound lesson. Change begins with acknowledgement. Linda, initially entrenched in her assumptions and prejudices, had to confront the truth of her actions. It was only when she stopped defending herself and truly looked at the harm she had caused that she was able to take the first steps toward meaningful change. This moment of self-reflection, painful as it was, is a crucial turning point. It reminds us that growth often comes from our most difficult, humbling experiences. We can all learn from Linda's willingness to admit her mistakes and seek a better path forward. On the other hand, Tanya's response throughout the ordeal was one of grace, patience, and strength. Tanya did not allow herself to be driven by anger or frustration. She maintained her composure in the face of unprovoked scrutiny, choosing to stand firm in her commitment to justice and fairness. Tanya's leadership was not defined by a title, but by her actions, by her ability to lead with empathy, even when facing adversity. She didn't see Linda's actions as something that needed to be erased. Instead, she saw them as an opportunity for both Linda and the community to grow. The real power of Tanya's leadership lies in her decision to not simply correct Linda's behavior, but to guide her on a journey of transformation. She understood that holding people accountable wasn't just about retribution. It was about teaching them, giving them the tools to recognize their flaws, and helping them take concrete steps to do better. Tanya's patience and willingness to engage in the hard conversations were the catalyst for the change Linda so desperately needed. Her approach reminds us that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about fostering an environment where others can learn, heal, and rise to their better selves. This story also teaches us an invaluable lesson about community. The town of Willow Creek, like so many other places, had been divided by invisible lines, lines drawn by preconceived notions, assumptions, and a lack of understanding. The confrontation at the pool was the spark that ignited a series of events, revealing just how deep the divide had run. But it was also the spark that ignited something much more important: dialogue. Linda's eventual apology, her willingness to engage with the people she had wronged, was a pivotal moment in transforming the atmosphere of the town. It's easy to point fingers, to blame others. But the true test of character comes when we look inward and ask ourselves, what can I do to make things better? Tanya, through her actions and commitment to transparency, showed the community that the path to healing is not just about confronting wrongs, but about listening to one another. It's about understanding the struggles others face and committing to fight for a better future, together. Linda's transformation from a woman bound by fear and judgment to one seeking redemption and accountability embodies the possibility of change that exists within all of us. We all have the ability to grow, to challenge our own assumptions, and to make choices that foster inclusivity and empathy. In the end, this is what the story of Willow Creek teaches us. Change is hard, but it is possible. It takes self-awareness, humility, and most importantly, action. It requires people like Tanya, who are willing to lead with understanding and compassion, and people like Linda, who are brave enough to admit their mistakes and do the difficult work of changing. The ripple effect of one woman's willingness to step forward and lead, and another's courage to learn and apologize, has the power to create lasting change in an entire community. As the residents of Willow Creek continue on their journey of growth, their story is a reminder to all of us that we must constantly examine our own actions and beliefs. Are we open to learning? Are we brave enough to confront the biases that may exist within us? Are we willing to forgive others and ourselves when we fail? The answers to these questions shape not only who we are as individuals, but the kind of communities we build. At a time when division can often feel overwhelming, the story of Linda and Tanya reminds us that empathy, accountability, and personal growth are the tools we need to move forward. It's not about achieving perfection. It's about striving for progress, understanding, and connection. If this story has resonated with you, inspired you, or even made you reflect on your own beliefs and actions, we invite you to support our channel. By subscribing, you help us continue to create content that tackles important issues with honesty, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to positive change. Every like, share, and comment helps spread the message that we can all learn, grow, and build stronger, more inclusive communities. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Let's continue to challenge ourselves, uplift each other, and work toward a better tomorrow.